So Realme has finally launched their Buds Air 5 Pro, which does make this comparison possible. Both of these have their similarities and strengths. I might lean towards one and you may lean to another. So allow me to walk you through exactly what these earphones are all about. If you would like to watch my in-depth reviews on both of these earphones, I'll leave their links down in the description below. So let's jump straight in with how these are built. I'm not too happy about both of these having glossy finishes. I've never really liked them. I was hoping that this time around they would come out with a matte finish, but here we are. Their cases are small and compact, making them easy to put into your pocket or bag quite easily. Both of them have already picked up scratches and scuffs despite me having the OPPO for just over a month and the Realme for just over a week at the time of recording this video. I like that the OPPO has put its branding on the front of the case in a mirror-like finish. It does look quite classy compared to the previous generation, and I also like the wave-like design they've incorporated on the lid. It does give it a more premium feel compared to the Realme case, which is almost identical to its previous generation set of earphones. They both feature USB-C charging and have a battery indication light on the front of the case, but the Realme comes with a sync and reset button on the case, which the OPPO doesn't. I've always preferred having one of these buttons on the case instead of fiddling with resetting the buds via the touch controls. Tactile buttons still rule. Upon opening the cases, both have the same layout. Realme should have stuck to the older layout because if it isn't broke, don't fix it. I struggle to get these earphones out because of their design and this specific layout. The OPPO remains easier to take out of its case. If you're concerned about wearing these outdoors, the OPPO comes with an IP55 rating, whereas the Realme comes with an IPX5 rating. Both have soft silicone ear tips with a meshing inside of them to prevent dust and debris from clogging up the inner meshing, which is a good thing to do for longevity, and both have touch controls on the upper section of the stem. On a comfort front, with the OPPO, I have felt a little discomfort in my left ear since my concha is a little smaller than my right ear. The Realme doesn't cause discomfort as soon as the OPPO does, but it does start to creep in after 45 minutes or so of having them on continuously. So if you happen to have smaller ears, these earphones may not be for you. These come with Bluetooth version 5.3. They have touch controls, multi-device pairing, and they also get app support. The Realme gets its own Realme Link app support, whereas the OPPO has to use a third-party app, which is a Hey Melody app. Thanks to the Realme having its own app, you do get a little more control of the earphones from it than you would with the Hey Melody app. One of the things that you get over the OPPO is 4 sound presets instead of 3, and you also get a manual EQ option, which is a nice welcome for anyone who likes to tinker with their personal sound. The other things you get are the dynamic bass control, which lets you control the bass a little more, as well as the volume enhancer, which gives the audio a boost in volume. You can customize your touch controls, but I do find it odd that this doesn't have a single tap control. Perhaps it's to avoid putting in a gesture by accident. Both sets of earphones give you a golden sound option, which will let you sit through a ear scan and do a hearing test so it can compensate for any hearing loss you may have, and they also have a 360 audio option, which does widen up staging when you're consuming your media. This is more fun to use for movie watching and gaming. When it comes to its gaming, the OPPO's latency period is a very respectable 47 milliseconds, and the Realme squeaks past it with just a 40 millisecond response time. If you'd like to see how these work in real time, feel free to watch these demos in my in-depth reviews. When it comes to the multi-device pairing, both of these earphones operate very similarly, but the Realme does seem to have a few connectivity issues, because whenever you're listening to the LDAC codec and you switch over to the second device when you've got multi-device pairing on, it tends to stutter and stammer a lot. It keeps dropping off the connection every maybe half a second or every 2 seconds. It's unable to latch on, almost as if it's dealing with too much data. Whereas the OPPO, I've never really had any connectivity issues with just yet. Now, this issue with the Realme doesn't happen every single time I've tried this, but the few times I've tried to transfer between my secondary device and the primary device, it does stutter and stammer. Another connectivity issue that it does have, that I've had somebody else also comment in my in-depth review, is that whenever you're in the app and you're trying to play around with some of the features or the ANC settings, it will suddenly tell you that this device is not connected or connect this device. I forget the exact tag that it tells you, but it's not latched on all the time. So sometimes I have to quit the app and come back into it. Now, this is a bit fiddly, but I think Realme should be able to address this with some sort of software or firmware update. When it comes to the active noise cancelling, both of these perform really well. Now, OPPO claims that they can reduce noises up to 49 decibels, and Realme claims they can do the same up to 50 decibels. Now, I know it's just, they claim a 1 dB difference, which doesn't seem like much, but the difference really isn't in the volume of noise they're eliminating, rather the range of noise that they're eliminating. Because the OPPO, as well as it does with eliminating droning noises from engines, fan motors, AC motors, there is a certain higher frequency that comes in from any of the noise around you. The Realme is able to silence those frequencies as well. Now, having said that, whenever my fan is on, I don't hear the motor very much, but I can hear the very soft whooshing of the air from the blades. It's not that the wind is hitting the microphone, it is a noise of the air that I can hear from a distance. Now, this is very soft and very in the distance. So if you're listening to music, there's no way you can hear this. But when it comes to an absolute side-by-side comparison of the OPPO and the Realme is able to reduce noises of a wider band than the OPPO can. So I'd say the Realme handles ANC a bit better than the OPPO for sure. Now, apart from the algorithms handling the active noise cancelling on these earphones, it also has microphones in these earphones that help with the algorithm as well. Realme does have 3 microphones per earbud, giving you a total of 6. I think OPPO has been very secretive about how many microphones they've used in this, because they are putting more of the load on the algorithm. So something tells me it's only got 2 microphones. And also at the same time, what these microphones do contribute to is the environmental noise cancelling for any phone calls that you might be making. Now, both of these earphones, I think, handle their call quality reasonably well. You are able to decipher what the other person is telling you, but there is very clearly one that is better than the other. So if you would like to see how your voice would carry over to your recipient, there's only really one way to find out. So I'm calling you from the usual busy street. I do all of my call tests from, just to give you a sense of what the environment sounds like. And these earphones are going to be battling four-wheelers, two-wheelers. There is some construction work going on over my left shoulder, and you might get the occasional pressure horn from a truck passing by. So of course this is a massive load on these earphones, and this is also the worst kind of situation they can possibly be in. They will do a little better in controlled environments like your office or at your home. But I have been on the camera microphone all this time, so you get a sense of the noise around me. And I'll switch over to the OPPO Enco Air 3 Pro right about now. So OPPO, of course, has been very secretive about how many microphones they've used in this. I think they're putting majority of the load on the algorithm to handle suppressing the noise around you, so that your voice is brought over a bit clearer. But it helps to always have extra data points. So if they did have, say, 3 microphones in this situation, I think it would have done a bit better, because at least the recording that I heard on the in-depth review, it sounded like the Air 2 Pro did significantly better than this when it came to its overall call quality. And this is, of course, very important to a lot of people. So this is, of course, been the demo of the OPPO Enco Air 3 Pro. And I'll shift over to the Realme Buds Air 5 Pro right about now. So I do think that these earphones are going to be sounding reasonably better than the OPPO did. In fact, you guys are sitting in the reviewer seat, so you do the best just to see which one works a bit better for you, because of course this is a very important aspect to a lot of people when it comes to the overall call quality. And this set of earphones does use 3 microphones instead of the previous generation 2 microphones. And I know for absolutely certain that this is a huge leap in overall call quality compared to the Buds Air 3. Those sounded very muffled. It wasn't as clear. The voice just didn't carry over very well as these do. So, of course, you are sitting in the reviewer seat, so you are the best judge to see which recording would suit you best, because this is how your overall vocal tonality will carry over to your recipient. So, I do hope that these recordings have given you a better idea of what these earphones are all about, and I will see you back at the studio. The Realme comes with 2 drivers. One is an 11mm dynamic driver and the other is a 6mm planar tweeter. So that handles the higher frequencies, whereas the other one handles the mids and lower frequencies. The OPPO, on the other hand, comes with a 12.4mm dynamic driver in both earphones. Both of these support SPC, AAC and the LDAC codec, and both of them have a frequency response of as low as 20 Hz and they go all the way up to 40,000 Hz. On a volume front, the previous generations of both of these earphones did sound like they had an amping problem, but these two stay far from it. The Realme does sound a bit louder than the OPPO for sure. Now, the Realme can get a little too loud for me at about 45 to 50%. So I usually don't listen to my music there with the Realme. I hover around the 30% volume. But if you switch the volume enhancer on, it gets significantly louder. And when that's on, I'm only sitting at about 30% volume because again, it gets too loud for me beyond that. So I wouldn't recommend listening to your Realme's above 50% volume with the enhancer on because it can get really loud. And if you want to preserve your hearing, you need to stay away from listening to very loud noises over a prolonged period of time. The OPPO is also a loud set of earphones, but not as loud as the Realme. I find myself sitting with that at about 45 or 50%, and I wouldn't recommend listening to this beyond 60% because it can get a little too loud. The thing with the OPPO is that even though it's not as loud as the Realme and you can crank your volume up, it just seems a little more composed. It seems a little calmer. It's not trying to blurt out all it can with a higher volume. I wouldn't say it's sedated, but it is definitely better structured when it is at louder volumes. Both these earphones have their own iterations of 360 sound. One is alive audio and one is spatial audio. And as soon as you switch these modes on, they do get slightly louder. And speaking about spatial audio and alive audio, this is their iteration of 360 audio, and it does affect the soundstage for sure because as soon as it's switched on, apart from the volume going slightly higher, the bubble of stage within your head does expand a little bit. I found myself liking what OPPO has done in the overall tuning because it better enunciates certain details and placement, whereas the Realme, it somehow just sits on trying to be noticed but just by being louder. It's not as specific in its detail and placement as good as the OPPO is. Now, one thing to keep in mind is these are not going to give you audiophile levels of staging, but with it on, it is going to give you a more immersive experience if you're gaming or watching movies, just because it's able to give you the illusion of some tones coming from a little out of the earphones, a little higher up, a little further away, and a little from the back because of this 360 audio emulation. So it is good enough for music and movie watching. Now, it does have a good centered phantom channel and good left and right separation when the staging is off, and I prefer to listen to my music with the alive audio and spatial audio off because it's just truer to the recordings. Imaging on these is similar, but if you're a stickler for detail, the OPPOs tend to image slightly sharper. If you want to zone in on certain nuances, the OPPO will let you do that a bit better. And I did think originally that the Realme would be better when it does this because of the tiny little planar driver, because planars are known to be able to carry a lot of detail, but the Realme somehow tends to sound a little bit muffled compared to the OPPO. The OPPO does tend to enunciate its structure a bit better, almost as if the people at OPPO had worked in high-res audio, which in fact they did. I think Realme might take a little while to get there, but then again, Realme is not exactly focusing on imaging and detail. They're focusing on a few other things. You can focus on certain nuances if you like focusing on certain details with both of these earphones, but the OPPO is slightly crisper. Now, both of these do support the LDAC codec, AAC and SPC. And with both of them, if you do have access to high-res audio and you're listening to the LDAC codec and then you shift over to the AAC, you can tell that there is a slight difference in detail with both of these earphones. It's more pronounced with the OPPO than it is with the Realme. And if you plan on using the LDAC codec and you don't have a high-res source of audio, then there really is no point in using LDAC. It doesn't make sense to even consider using the LDAC codec if you don't have high-res audio. Don't bother switching over to LDAC with either of these earphones if you're listening to music from YouTube Music or you've got a whole bunch of MP3s, because you've opened the floodgates but you're only giving a trickle of data. If you do have high-res audio, then it's worthwhile shifting over to LDAC, because the other thing with LDAC is if it's always on, it is also going to eat into your battery. High frequencies tend to be a little more forward with the Realme compared to the OPPO, which is a little more subtle in its delivery. The OPPO has a relaxed posture here and remains cleaner and better detailed in its delivery. The Realme isn't as crisp in this range and does have a bit of an elevation somewhere in the higher range, which can cause listening fatigue if your audio does play that specific frequency. I've noticed it piercing more so with acoustic music more than other genres. Listening to the Eagles perform Lying Eyes, the OPPO carries this range in a more natural and detailed manner, giving you more of a sense of what percussion should sound like, whereas with the Realme, this range tends to not have as good separation between different instruments. The OPPO is certainly more fun to listen to with this range. Mid frequencies are performed well with both of these earphones, but I did find myself enjoying the way Realme has tuned this range. The OPPO seems to have a little more of a dip in the lower mid-range, making vocals not as rounded as I would have liked, whereas the Realme has a more elevated lower mid-range, ensuring a more rounded vocal presentation. As nice as its tuning is, it just isn't as clean sounding as the OPPO here. Instruments and vocal separation is better defined with the OPPO for certain. Listening to Jason Mraz perform 93 Million Miles, his voice does come across as being more forward with the Realme and more rounded, which is enjoyable to listen to. But the OPPO handles his voice with better detail. Vocals do sound a little more distant with the OPPOs than sounding present like the Realme, but the way the OPPO separates its instruments from vocals and how much cleaner it sounds makes me want to gravitate towards the OPPO for listening to this range. When it comes to the lower frequencies, I can see a lot of people gravitating towards the Realme because of how it handles this range with a lot more enthusiasm than the OPPO. The Realme takes on a sense of excitement when anything bass happy is played through them. It's almost like a teenager being allowed to take a car out for a drive for the very first time. And even if you don't think the bass is adequate, each EQ preset available only increases the bass furthermore in heftiness. So this is one range that these earphones will certainly put a smile on your face. The OPPOs on the other hand choose to be more of a gentleman here. This range on them is a lot more composed. It is well defined without as much bloat as the Realme for certain. Both the earphones are able to play back low frequencies well, but the outward going character that the Realme has makes me think a lot more people would rather go for that big bass sound rather than a calm and composed bass with the OPPO. Listening to Harry Styles perform Adore You, there's a strong sub-low frequency that plays through the track. The Realme just makes you want to groove to this track a little bit more than the OPPO would. It's a little more outgoing and not afraid to embarrass itself. It's certainly got character here. The OPPO isn't lacking here, it's just more of an introvert compared to the Realme in character. I've tested these earphones on their original sound mode. No EQs, no bass enhancer, no volume enhancer. But if you do want to fiddle around or tweak your audio, you can go into the respective apps and play around with them a bit. Through the Hey Melody app, the OPPO can toggle between original sound, which is what I've tested them on and I like. You can switch over to bass boost mode, which I also like, and feel its thinness in bass disappears with this preset, yet still stays closer to being balanced than having a very exaggerated bass line. Then it has natural, which cuts down bass and mids a lot and emphasizes the upper frequencies. When you shift over to the Realme Link app, you get Serenade, which pulls back the bass, making it a bit thinner, so your highs and mids are a little more forward. The original sound is what I tested this on and find it to be enjoyable. When you shift over to Pure Bass, the bass gets a lot more prominent than the previous preset, introducing more thump, and Deep Bass brings out more sub-low registers. This is way too much bass for me, but it can be fun for movie watching and EDM consumption. Then you also get more control with an EQ that has 6 bands, which can be tweaked with a plus minus 6 dB gain, giving you more control than what the OPPO gives you via the Hey Melody app. So to sum up on a build front, I really don't like the fact that these are glossy finishes. I have tested some matte finished earphones and cases in the past and they just age so much more gracefully. They don't hold scratches, they don't show scratches. Even after 6 months or even a year, it's just the way to go. I don't know why OPPO and Realme aren't moving to this kind of design, but it's okay. It does look nice. If you do look after them and they don't scratch too much, it's okay. And if you intend on using a see-through wrap or some sort of a case, I suppose it's okay, but this is a matter of personal preference. I get really bugged when I have to interact with the Realme because getting access to the earphones is a problem. I preferred the layout of the Realme Buds A3 because it was outward facing, the ear tips were on the side. So I found those also very difficult to pull out because the earphones are slippery. So I'd pinch the ear tip and pull those out, which was still easy. This one, because of the layout, it's almost impossible to reach the ear tip because it's closer to the lid. I can't really get a grip on the earphones from a certain angle, so it's a bother. The OPPO is much easier to extract. Now, no doubt, if you do have slightly smaller fingers than I do, it is much easier to access these. Both have a very nice compact size. In fact, I think they're very similar in size. So they're very easy to hold and put in your pocket or even carry around. So this is something that I've always liked about Realme and OPPO cases. Something that bothers me on a feature front, the OPPO does not have in-ear detection on and off toggle within the Hey Melody app. Now I know I've had a lot of you come and tell me in the comments that you can toggle between the on and off on an OPPO phone or I think even OnePlus phones, but I am not able to do that. I'm currently using a Samsung phone and I'm locked in with the Hey Melody app. So I didn't like this because especially when I'm in this situation of doing a comparison, I like to do a lot of A/B testing. So I'll listen to the OPPOs, take them out, put on the Realme. So if it's a continuous song, it's easier to keep track of how each one sounds. when it doesn't have this in-ear detection off thing, it takes me a bit longer because I'm trying to focus in on each earphone and see how each of them sounds. The Realme was very pleasant because I could just go into the Realme Link app and switch in-ear detection off. So the handover between Realme and OPPO was easier for me. But every time I took out the OPPO, the Realme was paused because the OPPO coming out of my ears was pausing the music. The multi-device pairing is of course quite cool. I've always found it really convenient. It's easier than the older variants of multi-device pairing because I think the OnePlus Bud Z2, you could connect to two devices, but in the sense you had to stop your media on one and then press and hold one earbud, and then it would search for the secondary device and then latch onto that. So that's a matter of a few seconds, say 8-10 seconds. So by the time you do that with a phone, if you're getting a call or wherever else with a secondary device or primary device, you might miss your call. This multi-device pairing works well because it hands over immediately to your phone whenever you're getting a call. So it is the way to go. One thing I do wish that these had, because the fact that it can hand over to a phone call and pause your secondary device's media, I'm pretty sure this is possible, and I'm hoping that this is implemented. If these companies could introduce a way where when you press play on the secondary device, it can pause the primary device and just hand over automatically to the secondary. In the current situation where the way these two function is, I have to pause the media on the primary device and then play it on the second, and then when I want to go back to the primary, I have to pause it on the secondary and then play it on the primary device. So it is a bit fiddly. I mean, I'm being a bit picky about this, but I'm pretty sure it's possible to do. It'll make things a little more seamless because I think everybody's going to like or prefer this feature in particular. When it comes to the other features, I think these are absolutely loaded except for not having wireless charging, which is okay. I don't know how many people use wireless charging, but the active noise cancelling is something that I wasn't expecting Realme to be better at. But you know, usually it's just a tussle when it comes to marketing that somebody says, oh, I do 49 dB and I do 50. So it's just a matter of, oh, 1 dB. You can't really tell the difference between 1 dB, but the main difference between the Realme and the OPPO is the fact that it sounds as if the OPPO is isolating this much noise, say this frequency to this frequency, whereas the Realme is isolating that much more noise. So all the higher frequencies that are coming in through the OPPO, I mean, it's not really disturbing. It's just a slight higher frequency that's coming in because it is able to drop decibel levels down by quite a bit. But those higher frequencies, when you do A/B testing between the two in a quiet place, not listen to any music, the Realme actually does do a much better job of isolating those frequencies. Most people are going to be using ANC when they listen to music, but if you plan on using these earphones just to silence the world around you and you don't want to hear your fans, you don't want to hear traffic next to you, if you're near a busy street, the Realme is definitely the better option to go for instead of the OPPO. On a sound front, the Realme is more like that guy at a party who heard you say a joke softly and then said it louder and then got the credit for cracking the joke, because it's just the louder guy. It's wanting to be louder. It's wanting to be bass heavier. It wants to be more prominent and noticed. It leans towards just being a louder set of earphones when it comes to its overall sound. Now, I do prefer the OPPO on a sound front because it is better structured, it is calmer, it is more composed. It's not trying to be as in your face as the Realme is. I mean, even if you don't have the volume enhancer on the Realme, it is a bit loud. In fact, the Realme, I think, with a lot of the music I was listening to, because it is tuned the way it is, I think it leans more towards sounding distorted than clear. The OPPO is definitely the much cleaner, crisper sounding set of earphones. So if you're somebody who's leans more towards the audiophile side of the hobby, or you just prefer cleaner sounding sound, be it from your movies or your music, or even if you don't listen to high-res music but you like crisper, cleaner detail, the OPPO is definitely the way to go. I lean towards the OPPO more than I do with the Realme. But having said that, I do know a lot of people do like a heaviness in their bass, they do like more body in their music, they want loudness. The Realme is exactly that set of earphones. It will give you the loudness, it will give you the bass, it will give you that enjoyment in your music. So let's get to the price. How much do these cost? Well, at the time of recording this video, the Realme and OPPO have a maximum retail price of 7,999, and they are being sold for 4,999. So both of them are similar on many fronts, of course, but they have their own characters. They do have their own person they're trying to reach out to. So the Realme is looking for somebody who wants the heaviness in bass. They want the loudness. They want terrific active noise cancelling. Whereas the Oppo is leaning more towards the guy who wants a more composed experience with his music. He doesn't want anything too loud. So it's interesting to see that despite being so similar on various grounds, they do have their own individuality. So they are looking at different people to own them. So I do hope that you found this video helpful and informative, and I also hope that I've helped you make some sort of purchase decision. If you would like to help the channel, I'm sure you know exactly how to. But of course, thank you for tuning into Paul's POV for some sound advice.